Good Monday morning. It is pouring out there. Be careful if you're driving, because everybody, when they're driving, when there's rain, there's an accident every single time when I drive in when there's rain. So it's going to be a lot of Karen Stewart today, I'm sure, letting you know about all the places that someone crashed into one another because they are reckless. What a big day of football. It wasn't happening around these parts. Of course, you had another Giants loss. We knew they were going to get killed by the Ravens. They did. The Jets end up winning a game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their defense is still an atrocity, but their offense looked the best it has looked since Aaron Rodgers got here. So if that's a positive for you, then good for you. And this Bill Belichick story comes out that I can't believe. There's got to be more to the story than him just reaching out to the Jets to gauge their interest, because it doesn't make any sense. And the Detroit Lions, everybody's favorite team in the NFL, everybody's darling. Everybody loves Dan Campbell. You know, Dan Campbell, he's like the Christmas coach. Everybody loves themselves a Dan Campbell. Oh, well, they got smacked around in their own building, couldn't stop anybody, and then made that game closer than it should have been. So it was nice to see that as Josh Allen cemented, to me, his MVP status as he threw to everybody in the world. Didn't even need to use Amari Cooper. He's throwing to Ty Johnson. He's throwing to running backs. He's just the man. He's the absolute man, and he put that on display yesterday. Good morning, Boomer. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, G. Former Jet Ty Johnson, that is.
Yeah, that's right.
I will say that, in regards to all this stuff that's flying around the Giants right now, let's start there. I don't know what fans expected. I mean, like, you have Tim Boyle, Tommy DeVito playing quarterback for you. Tommy DeVito can't stay on the field. I mean, backup quarterbacks don't know how to protect themselves. Then you have Tim Boyle, which the Jet fan felt last year. They had a little Tim Boyle experience. I don't want to, kill these guys. I mean, they are who they are. They made it to the NFL, and they deserve a lot of credit for that, to be able to tell their grandkids that they did play in the NFL, and that's a big thing. But at the end of the day, for the New York Giants, like, what did you expect? They were 16.5-point underdogs for a reason going into this game. And the way people are reacting to it is just mind-boggling to me. It's like, yeah, it's obvious. They're missing half their roster. The players on the field want to win. I think the coach is trying to win, but it's everybody's best interest not to win.
Yeah,
and you have to be realistic about that. I mean, these I said the same thing about the Patriots this morning. Like, you can't be upset with where we are in the season, what your team is doing, what it looks like, what the roster looks like. Now, if you want to, and I've said this, nothing is etched in stone. No matter what John Mara said about 8 or 9 weeks ago about Shane and Dable staying here, I was telling you that it's going to depend on what it looks like going out the door first. And here we are right in the middle of that. And yesterday was as ugly as it gets, but there have been uglier games that the Giants have played this year, believe it or not, because I expected it to look exactly like that.
Yeah, I think that most people did. I didn't. I know you got a lot of Giant fans, irrational Giant fans in your life, and maybe that's where you're getting some of that. I didn't even really focus too much on the Giants fan reaction, because for me, I mean, this was a foregone conclusion, and especially when you find out that they got to go to Tim Boyle. He didn't even play all that poorly. I mean, I thought you were going to see a pick six and 7 sacks once he came in, but he was okay. I mean, moved the ball a little bit, but I mean, they're going to get killed. We knew they were going to get killed, and it really just comes down to the end of the season with them and where they end up drafting. And you see Malik Neighbors and Shedeur Sanders throwing a football together in New York City. Maybe that gets you excited. The talk of Cam Ward, if they don't get Shedeur Sanders, could get you excited. I mean, that's where it's at right now. And I heard Tiki say it on the broadcast as he was doing the game yesterday for CBS, and he said that even though he still believes that it's going to be Shane and Dable that shepherd this franchise into the future, it just looks horrific on game day. But, I mean, when you have to go to these guys, as you said before, it wasn't going to end well. You're going to get crushed as one of the better teams in the NFL.
This is usually
coming off a bye, no less.
Remember this, where Joe Judge talked himself right off the ledge, and how Brian Daboll handles this publicly, and how he tries to keep the team together. His words, a lot of that, goes into a coach, an owner's decision as to whether or not you keep a certain coach. I mean, he's been masterful, I think, when it comes to the press conferences. Hasn't really said anything that has, killed him. He hasn't stepped in doo-doo, if you will. I mean, he's been okay. I mean, he's been fine. But again, I could just imagine what it would be like to speak to him away from the microphone. Speaking to him away from the microphone, you'd get a completely different set of opinions about what they're dealing with. But the public face is a completely different set of circumstances that I think he's handled relatively well. So he's not going to talk himself out of a job.
No, he's too smart for that. He knows what he needs to do publicly. He's never, in his 3 years that he's been here, said something that has made a story bigger than it needed to be, which is something that plagued Rob Saleh, it plagued Joe Judge, it's plagued lots of coaches who have gotten fired. That's one thing Brian Daboll is not going to do. And, you know, as I mentioned before, the biggest problem for this Giants regime is whiffing on these draft picks at the top of the draft, and there's just 3 massive ones that would scare me. The thing that scares me more than anything isn't even what happens the rest of this season, because they're not going to win. They shouldn't win. They've got to get to the top of the draft to get their quarterback, because there's 2 ways that you can change a franchise. One is the head coach, the alpha male dude head coach who walks in there, changes the culture, and then follows that up with building a roster. Or 2, getting the star quarterback. So that's what they're hoping for now, is getting the star quarterback. But the thing that would scare me going forward is, do these guys know how to pick players in the draft? That would be the biggest one. I mean, yeah, you hit on a couple guys. You know, Tyrone Tracy's a nice story after you let Saquon go, but no one's really talking about that because Saquon left. I mean,
nobody's talking about any of that because the team stinks.
Exactly. I mean, your 2 best players are out, and your 2 best players weren't even drafted by this regime. You know, Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal and Deonte Banks. I mean, these guys they've missed. So that's the thing, the biggest thing if I'm John Mara. If I'm making a change, it's because I don't believe these guys know how to pick the right players. But then again, as we said, we went back, and the world loved the Giants drafts when they picked those guys. Oh, A and A+, and they couldn't do any better than this, and ended up being all flops. But, I mean, John Mara, after Bill Belichick ended up going to North Carolina, you would have to either have, you know, Ben Johnson or... I mean, I don't even know if he would go to Vrabel. I think he'd be like enamored. You would have to have the top candidate and Ben Johnson say, hey, I want the Giants. And that's not going to happen. I don't see John Mara getting rid of these 2 guys and then replacing them with 2 guys that are the same exact people as Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, just with no experience.
Well, you know, when you have planes flying over MetLife Stadium saying, fire everybody, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, but
I'm just telling you, and it happens, you know, it affects season tickets, it affects the attendance at the stadiums, it affects the business side in terms of sponsorships. I mean, there are a lot of things that right now the Giants are going through, and this is why I'm saying you got to see how this whole thing ends. And I'm not saying that a win would have made everybody feel better today. Like the Jets may feel a little bit better today about what happened yesterday. So they won a game. You know, they went out there and they played their best game offensively. And I was thinking towards the end of that game that had the Jets lost that game, I couldn't even imagine how many people would have been blaming Aaron Rodgers when Aaron Rodgers had nothing to do with losing that game. Aaron Rodgers had everything to do with winning the game.
Yeah, those players on defense are the biggest losers I've ever seen. I cannot believe that they gave up the amount of yardage and first downs that they did to Mac Jones in that offense. I mean, it was startling. I mean, I think they had something like, I looked down at it when I was watching the game, I think they had something like 16 first downs in the first half, which I don't think that they had done in the previous 2 games. The offense looked good. But look at the Jaguars here. Yeah, 27 first downs and 421 yards of offense. And if you know anything about football, you know that the Jaguars have had one of the worst offenses in the league the entire year, and it's gotten worse since Mac Jones has been the quarterback.
Well, look at that third down efficiency, over 50%. Which is amazing.
So bad.
And then it really came down to Mac Jones turning into Mac Jones.
Yeah, so it was a couple turnovers, and that ended up being a big deal. And the offense looked good, and Devontae Adams looked good. And that stuff you can't deny. But, I mean, it's the Jets fan who was hanging on to any sort of hope and then saw this yesterday. And it's like, this is why – you think about running it back next year. Okay. So, in the 2 years, and the other argument that I love that people make is like, well, now Aaron Rodgers is fully healthy. Oh, okay. So he's fully healthy when they're 4-10. And the majority of the time he's been here, he's been hurt. and he's 41 years old. But let's bring him back and hope that he's healthy next year.
I'll tell you, the last two games he played in Florida in warm weather, he looked great.
Yeah, well, too bad that's not what we have up here for the majority of the time. And you also have to go to Buffalo, and yes, you get a chance to go to Miami, but, I mean, that's one game out of the year. I mean, just to think that, this is what Aaron Rodgers looks like when he's healthy. Well, guess what? He can't stay healthy. And to assume that he's going to stay healthy next year is stupid. And you're not going to compete, even if he is healthy. You're not competing with the best teams in the AFC.
I know, but it all depends on who the coach is next year for the Jets as to whether or not he's going to end up staying here.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. If it's a big personality head coach, he's going to want a guy that he can win with, and then they try to draft a guy. Maybe they develop a guy. I mean, the other options are relatively not exciting.
For the quarterback position, but I really don't think you got to look at it like apples to apples in that situation. I think the choice is, do we bring Aaron Rodgers back to try to make the playoffs and have a decent season, or do we start our massive rebuild that we're going to have to do after next season anyway right now? Do we get started with that right now as opposed to delaying it another year, dealing with all of his drama, probably another injury? I mean, that's really the question. Not so much who is the quarterback better than Aaron Rodgers going to play next year. No, that right there, it's going to be hard to answer that question. You're right. But the better question is, why not get the rebuild started now as opposed to basically sticking around and watching this Jets team go to another, at the very best, like 9-8 record next year and not get anywhere near the best teams in the conference, like the Bills, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and so on, because you're just not going to be able to compete with them.
For me, the thing that I look at is that here we are late in the season, and he's thrown the best he's thrown since he's gotten here, because we didn't see him in the first year, of course. But this year, I mean, these passes, some of these throws that he's making, I mean, they're as good as anybody in the NFL, if not the best in the NFL.
Right, but this is what you're falling for the same thing these guys fall for. When he's been healthy, which is what now? This is the healthiest been.
Yeah,
it's been two games out of the how many that he possibly could have played.
Both he and Kirk Cousins are coming off of Achilles. It's not easy. Look, I'm not sitting here telling you that he should be here for the next 10 years. I'm just telling you that if they do hire a known coach, a known personality,
they won't.
That guy is not going to want to go into a game with Jameis Winston. He's not going to want to go into a game with Derek Carr. He's not going to want to go into a game with, Sam Darnold. He's not going to want to go into a game with any of those guys. And
I'll tell you, Sam Darnold's played 50 million times better than Aaron Rodgers has in any game out of the season. So and he's 14 years younger than him.
Yeah, but the reason they're not going to bring Sam Darnold back here.
Well, yeah,
I'm saying.
But new guy. But if you're just comparing those two quarterbacks,
yeah, but they're not going to bring Sam back here. So what are the alternatives? And they're certainly not in range for one of these top two quarterbacks, and hopefully one of these top two quarterbacks, I guess if they're drafted by the Giants and it's another new coach and another new system, they're going to, is that guy going to play right out of the gate? I would hope not, but who knows with the pressure around here and the expectations of the fan base, who knows? I mean, it's crazy. With this Bill Belichick signing in North Carolina now, it kind of just makes you, who would be the guys to come in and run the Giants?
To run the Giants? I mean, I think it's going to be Dable and Shane. That's why I keep saying that. I don't think that John Mara is going to be enticed by anybody outside of Ben Johnson to come in and do it. I mean, I think, there's certain guys that I could see, Woody Johnson, bringing in Aaron Glenn, or maybe Woody Johnson going with the combination of John Robinson and Vrabel, which you could do worse than that, even though John Robinson made one of the worst trades in the history of the NFL, or at least in the last decade of the NFL when he traded A.J. Brown to the Eagles. But, I could see that happening. For the Giants, I think this is why I think it's these two guys. And I don't think it even matters how the rest of it looks like. I think the way they look at it is, we're going to give these guys an opportunity to work with the quarterback that they draft, either 1 or 2 at the top of the draft, because there's nobody else out there that we're going to bring in that we feel better about than these guys. I mean, and I know that sounds crazy to a lot of Giants fans, but, I mean, you just going to now bring in 2 new guys? I mean, is there the experienced coach He's not like John Mara won't go down the John Gruden route. He's not going to do that. Now, who else is there that you want to bring in?
Yeah,
Spags? You going to bring in Spags? Well, who's his offensive coordinator? I mean, is his offensive coordinator the guy from Miami? Who was Cam Ward's or is Cam Ward's offensive coordinator? All right, maybe that's something they could do. But the more I think about it, the more I think that they're just going to keep those guys. And then I cannot wait to see who the Jets hire. It's going to be hilarious. It's going to be so funny because they're just going to do the same thing again. And then those guys will I'll just, when we see them at training camp, we'll be like, we're going to talk for 3 years. That fourth year, you're not going to be here.
Oh, Jesus.
Sorry. And it's not your fault.
Right.
It's not your fault. Everybody who comes in here, it's the same thing. So don't worry about it.
Well, I mean, that's why you have to offer, your recommendations.
I've been screaming about John Gruden a million times, but they won't do it. Woody Johnson won't do it. And I don't know what the hell happened with this Bill Belichick story. I can't. I need to know more. And I saw the Athletic people and Diana Rossini put it out, and then Connor Hughes had confirmed the story. I mean, I don't know if this was one of those things where they're like, hey, reach out to all the teams that have already fired their coach, but I haven't heard that yet, just to see if there's interest and maybe we could, get more money out of this situation or more things that we want in the contract or whatever. But I can't imagine everything that Bill Belichick said about Woody Johnson and how much he hates the Jets, and he's put that out there publicly, that he'd actually be willing to coach the Jets. I will not believe that.
Well, it just goes to show you just how badly Bill Belichick won him back in the NFL.
Well, not according to him. Remember, he's like, Bill Belichick soured on the NFL and all that bullcrap because nobody wanted him.
Well, that's why he soured on the NFL, because nobody wanted him.
Exactly.
Well, what happened first?
Yeah.
So I could see his representatives asking around, seeing if anybody had any interest. But then again, North Carolina was on a very, very tight timeline, and they had to get their guy in there. And in order, to actually get ready for this upcoming season in 2025, with the transfer portal open and the recruiting going on, and I think he already landed a 5-star QB going to North Carolina, which is a good thing.
Of course. Get it going. He's probably going to have some success there early, you would expect, with his track record, so we'll see how it pans out.